aim at. With expressions, it is possible to aim one column toward another. With properly placed images on the columns, it will appear as if one image is tracking the other. This could be a technique for controlling eyes, camera aim, or linking any body part to a control icon which is located off camera or in frame but hidden during final render. An AimAt example is given in the Tahoma 2D user manual. It uses a trigonometric formula. This formula is explained on Wikipedia. We can see that if we know the coordinates of an object that we would like the angle toward, we can use a formula, A tan 2, which is arctangent 2, and we put in the value of the y coordinate and the x coordinate in relation to ourselves. So what is that distance along the x-axis and along the y-axis from ourselves? Those are the two parameters that go into this formula. To set up such an example, create a level, add an object to be pointed at. In this case, I'm using a circle. Create another level, add an object to act as the pointer. I'm creating a long, thin rectangle. Set some keyframes for the object that will be pointed at. In my case, I set a starting keyframe, and then halfway through the animation, I've set another keyframe, and then I copied the starting keyframe and pasted it onto my ending frame so that the animation will loop. Next, go to the timing room. In the timing room, choose the object that is going to be your pointer, that column. Choose its rotation attribute. Click on the column heading for that attribute. If there are already cells filled in, go ahead and press delete so that you clear out that entire column. And then enter this formula into the interpolation. Choose the type of expression, and then enter this formula. Now, how to design the formula so that it's correct for your situation. The formulas in the expressions are based on the column numbers, so it will ignore the labels that we've given to the columns. And this is an important thing to remember. If you change the order of the columns in the future, you'll have to update the formulas. They will not automatically update. There is an experimental feature, however, that will allow that to happen, that they will automatically update. Under Preferences, Animation, automatically modify expression on moving referenced objects. I haven't tested it before, but I'll tick it now. That might help. That might change the formulas. For instance, if I move the column that contains pointer 1 further down the list in the timeline, it should update the formulas that refer to that column. So, now, enter the formula, and it's the arctangent 2 formula. And first will be the y value. So, there are several ways to refer to attributes within expressions. North-south is one of the ways. I think y is the other way that could work here. And east-west is another alternative way to refer to the x-axis. So you can use y or north-south or x or east-west. The important thing is that you've got the y-axis represented to the left of the comma and the x-axis represented to the right of the comma. And that gives the proper formula. When you click Apply, it's going to generate all the values And the 180, I should point out, the reason the 180 is here, because in order to flip an angle to point in the opposite direction, which I want to do in my example because the angle of rotation is actually going to point away from the object the way this formula is set up and where I have the center of my column. So I figured it out when I ran my example. It was actually pointing, the center of rotation here is marked with a red dot. And instead of pointing at the target, it was pointing away from it. The red dot was toward it, but it was pivoting the opposite way. So if that happens to you, just put the 180 in there and it reverses the angle 180 degrees, and then it was working correctly for me. I can also point out here that I have two other pointers set up demonstrating differences that can be configured. Notice when I'm choosing the pointed at object with the animate tool active, see where its center is? That's actually what's being pointed at. So on that column, if the center was not located in the middle of the image, let's say it was a little further down and to the left, well, the formula would have my pointer column pointing down there. So you would wonder, well, what's wrong? It's not pointing at the image that I want it to. Check to make sure that you've got your center for that column at the center of the image you want to point at. And on these pointers, the center of rotation for them is where their column center is. So I put a red mark on there so that it's possible to see in this demonstration where their centers are. So the way I did this, I created a pointer first, and then I created another layer in the timeline and pointed it to the same drawing from the same level. And that gives me the option of setting up another formula. So I've called that my pointer 2. I can give it a different name. It has a different column number, of course. And then I'm able to put in the formula without the 180. So you're able to see a working example of the two formulas side by side. And now I wanted another pointer that was rotating in its middle rather than at either end. So I created a new image on a new level and exposed that in a column and gave that the appropriate formula. So there's three formulas to compare to here as you look at this video. On pointer 3 is in column 4, of course. So column 4 shows up here. Column 1 is still the pointed at column. So the column numbers correspond to that. And if we go back to the 2D room, you'll see that the center for my pointer 3 is in the middle of that rectangle. Now, when I run this demo, you'll see that they pivot where that red dot is. So just a quick review. When you set up one column to point at another column, you're working with the centers of those columns. So with the animate tool active and the center chosen as the attribute, make sure that that center is over the image in the column that you want to be pointed at. And on the pointer, make sure that you have it positioned where you want that image to rotate. So you can see pointer 1, pointer 2, pointer 3. Those are the pivot points that I want to rotate. And the formulas are set up accordingly so that they will point at the center of the pointed at object. That concludes this video on AimAt, an expression to have one column aim at another column. Thank you for watching.